Welcome to Expert Talks by InnoVint. I am your host, Lauren Heindel, and today we are doing a little bonus episode for you. I'm very excited. As some of you may know already, we launched a new dashboard this harvest called Harvest Watch, where we presented real-time harvest progression over the course of the harvest for 3 different regions. So today I am joined by Anna Muthig, the brains behind this dashboard, and we're here to talk a little bit about Harvest Watch and how it works, what our intentions are with it, and yeah, just kind of pull back the curtain. Let's start with you telling us a little bit about your story, Anna. And again, thank you so much for doing this and being here and giving our listeners a little sneak peek into the background of Harvest Watch.
Sure. I think brains behind the operation is a little bit generous. I I started in wine about 13 years ago. I started off my first job at a winery was at the front of the house. I was doing tasting room and events. It was a really small operation. We made less than 2,000 cases a year. They were really kind, wonderful people and taught me kind of how to do everything. So bottling, started working in winemaking and harvesting with them. And that was a really wonderful experience. After about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, we were doing mostly Cabernet and Cabernet Franc. So I wanted to try some different things. So I did Riesling in Clare in Australia, and I really wanted to get into sparkling. So after Australia, when we got back to the US, I started working in sparkling, and that was at a much larger facility. So I got the opportunity to work in trials and data collection and analysis, and so that's sort of where things have gone since then in that direction.
Yeah, you mentioned sparkling and data collection. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you are now and what you're doing these days?
Sure. So most of what I do now is kind of process and additive trials and things like that. Mostly focused on data analysis of trials. We have a few different sites around the world, so we try and collect and then replicate different trials in different sites, sometimes different grape varieties, things like that. And I process a lot of that. Um, and then, so kind of where the Harvest Watch connection came in is I started an analytics degree earlier this year. And yeah, I was talking to Dan, and we were just kind of talking about the direction of InnoVint and Harvest Watch and data analysis and sort of evolved naturally from there.
Thanks, Anna. That's so awesome. And I love to hear how you are taking your background in wine and now moving into more of a data analytics phase and marrying those two things together. And that's really, what Harvest Watch is, right? It's taking winemaking insights or vineyard insights and looking at them with a microscope and a analytic mind and applying that into making better wine and having a better process. But I won't spoil it. I want to hear it from you. So I'd love to start kind of with the Harvest Watch origin story. How did this dashboard came to be? I know you just mentioned you talked to Dan. Dan is our CTO here at InnoVint, but I'd love to, hear a little bit more about that conversation and how it got here.
Sure. And I don't mean to speak for him, but I think this is something Dan's been thinking about for a long time, especially in the sense that a rising tide lifts all ships.
Hmm.
Kind of how can this data that Innovent has and has been collecting long term, how can that like rise the tide in a sense? So this is his story, but I'll tell it. He talks about a couple years ago, just meeting with some winemakers right before harvest and hanging out, and the conversation sort of quickly devolved into what's your Brix, what's my Brix, what's looking right, what's coming in first, and this sort of like really quick back and forth of like what's going on, what's happening now, what's happening next. And I think that anyone that works in wine, that really resonates because if you go to any bar in Napa between like October and July, or July and October, um, there's this sort of constant undercurrent of what are you working on? How are things looking? What does the yield look like? Um, and I think Dan's question, and then later his question to me was sort of, how do you not already know? How can we make a system where that answers this question, like all these questions that are constant that people have all the time? Um, and so when he asked, "Is this something you'd like to work on?" I said, like, "Yeah, that sounds awesome."
Great. We're so lucky that, you two made that connection and you've been working on this because I think your bird's eye view on what the data can look like and how it would be applicable for a winemaker in their day-to-day, I think was so integral in making it a usable tool. So kind of speaking on like that day-to-day use, what are some use cases that you can think of for different wine producers? You mentioned that you have a background working in single varietals and then you worked with sparkling producers. So, can you think of some things that very specific winemakers are using this for?
For sure. So especially like you said, at a bird's eye view, you have years like 2023 where things are running late, historically late. And so I think what people are looking for first and foremost is validation. Are the things that I'm seeing reasonable, especially when you're younger or you're starting at a new estate or you've gotten control of a new vineyard and you don't really have the same history? The calls that you're making affect your wine, the quality, the characteristics, obviously for the next year. And so there's a lot of pressure when you're making those seasonal decisions because of, how long you deal with the ramifications of those decisions. So knowing you're in line with the rest of the region, I think is this kind of added level of assurance. Um, in terms of specific use cases, I mean, anecdotally, there's a bunch of sparkling wine producers in Carneros. And if you talk to people about when they start prepping for the season, a lot of people say, or a lot of people in Sonoma and Napa say, when I start seeing those little hand picking bins pop up down the highway along the fence, they're like, that's when I start washing my macro bins and I start cleaning my presses. And so everyone knows everything's sort of connected, and things sort of waterfall one after the other. And so it's just sort of a way to know where you are in the season and what's happening.
Definitely. Being able to show up on the dashboard and see, oh, my Brix is on par with other folks' Brix, or if it's not, why is it not? And having kind of like those red flags or those green flags. You mentioned it saying you're a new user or you're getting fruit from a new vineyard this year and you're coming to Harvest Watch, you're just landing on this page. I would love to hear from your point of view how you move through this page and interpret this data, or, how would you recommend somebody to do that?
Sure. I think how you look at the data totally depends, obviously, on your situation and what you need to know. Our goal is that it's very flexible, and that you can kind of tailor it to your situation and the data points that you find important to make your own decisions. Um, if you're running a custom crush facility and you have grapes coming in from across the region, I know a lot of people don't really have access to that analysis in advance. And so they can kind of make predictions on how is that region looking, how is that variety looking, and kind of get an idea of what's going to come in or when they can expect their clients to be bringing grapes in. I know a lot of people work in shared facilities. Um, and so if you're sharing equipment, if you're sharing staff, you may not have Pinot Noir coming in, but if you're bringing in Merlot and all the bins are still full of Pinot, you're going to have a hard time. So that's kind of what I meant by everything's connected. So for me, when you come to the harvest dashboard, and right now, for example, most of what's left in Napa at least is Cabernet Sauvignon. So you can filter down to just Cabernet. You can see on the map sort of just the different analyses of which subregions are looking more ready than others. Um, Down below that, you can see in the like tons per week, there's been two pretty significant dips that line up with the two storms that we've had. Below that, you have Brix and acidity, and we've put other years in there so you can compare how things look according or compared to some years. Um, and so I think there's a lot of power in specifically being able to filter down to your subregion, to your variety, and then to see the history of those things and kind of get like a projection of what you're expecting next.
Yes, definitely. And I want to address the overall sort of North Star of this project, which was to be a live resource for those like in the trenches of harvest, right? And one way that I think you acted super quickly and were just like on point with was adding the AQI and the fire updates into the dashboard when the picket fire broke out. I'd love for you to talk me through your thinking on that and kind of the thinking behind these other data points that are on the dash and the rationale between what you included, when you included it, and what you excluded and why.
So you use the phrase North Star, which I think is really interesting there because kind of the whole point was to take all this data. We have weather, we have data from InnoVint, we have some historical kind of regional analysis, and we want to distill it down to the things that people are basing their decisions on in the moment. We wanted this to be a community resource, and I think the questions we ask ourselves is like, what is the community making those decisions based on right now? Um, Unfortunately, I know from experience, I know a lot of California knows from experience that grape harvest and fire danger can line up. Um, and sometimes the calls that you're making aren't just based on Brix and acid, it's based on is the AQI low enough to harvest today? Like, do we need to be getting masks for people in the cellar? Do we need to stop operations? So I think that was sort of a logical extension to put those data points of AQI and direction of fire and wind direction and things like that in the dashboard, because they're being considered right alongside grape analysis and phenological ripeness.
That's great. I think just being adaptive and flexible and getting that feedback from people who are actually using the dashboard is what will make this tool even more valuable and align us even more so with our North Star. And that's a perfect segue into this next question I have for you around feedback. So we have gotten some feedback throughout the last couple of months, and we wanted to address just a few of those live, or I guess this is recorded, but we wanted to we wanted to address a few of those here. And Anna, I know that you have some of them, and I wrote down a few of them as well. So let's go through just a couple and yeah, and talk through either why we chose something or just the ease of making that change.
Sure. First of all, I love feedback. And we've got some really helpful and constructive and specific feedback over the course of the season, which is wonderful. So one of the first things that came up was you have different decimal points for, different types of data. If this were a financial dashboard, it would all be the same. And I was like, great, I'd love to make that all the same. Not something I'd ever considered, but there's all sorts of things like that that are significant or important to users that just tell me and I'll change it. And so I
Perfect.
thought that was pretty meaningful early on.
Yes.
Honestly, the dashboard before it was released started out 3 or 4 times as long as it is now, because I got excited. Um, and we have all sorts of data about seasonal progress and veraison and bud break and weather. And so we pared it down to what we determined was kind of like the seasonal critical decision-making points. And we don't want it to be overwhelming, especially as people were first like coming to it and determining how they wanted to work it into their workflow. So we have a lot of ideas and a lot of places to expand. And what we're looking for, I guess, is just the feedback on how do people want to use it.
Definitely. How do people want to use this? And during the course of this harvest, we actually added another location. We added San Luis Obispo based on feedback, based on demand, I guess you could say. And we did have some other people write in asking, what about Lodi? What about, Walla Walla? And that we are more than happy to expand. And I think that's, in the plan for 2026. And I'm not making any promises here, but we are definitely figuring out how to make this a resource for the community at large. So, um, on that note, we want to hear from you. If you have used Harvest Watch this year, please let us know what you loved, what you didn't love, kindly, and any suggestions that you have for next year or data that would be critical for you in your decision making. And a link to give feedback will be in the show notes and is also on the Harvest Watch dashboard in the lower left-hand corner. But yeah, thank you so much, Anna, for peeling back the layers and giving us the brains behind this amazing dashboard that I think we all were very pleased with how it turned out.
Sure, I had a ton of fun. So I'm just glad to hear that people are using it and able to, make decisions based on it. I would say though, we take feedback on the Harvest Watch and it's anonymous. So if you want us to answer you specifically, we're happy to. Just tell us who you are.
That is a great point because there has been some feedback and we're like, I wish we could respond, but it is
Sometimes somebody has
anonymous.
a really specific question and I'm like, I have an answer, but I don't know what I don't know what
Yeah.
to do with it.
Well, that's it for another bonus episode of Expert Talks powered by InnoVint. I'm your host, Lauren Heindel, and I am super stoked to have had this amazing episode with Anna. Thank you again. And until next time, cheers.